Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of the Coffee Squad podcast. Today, we are joined by Jake as usual, and we have a special guest, Cliff, talking to us today about home cybersecurity. Cliff is a cybersecurity consultant specializing in credential theft and cloud security. I'm going to introduce him. I really don't know anything what I'm talking about, so we're depending on Cliff to kind of explain everything we're talking about today. So he has done some work with on-premises solutions to isolate identities, making it harder for malicious adversaries to gather credentials to compromise networks, but is now focusing more on cloud security.
Well, that's a lot. That's a mouthful, man.
You're telling me.
Man.
And I didn't understand anything I just said other than cloud security.
Well, awesome. Hey, man, I've known Cliff for a little while. Great dude. And glad to have him on the show. So most importantly, he is a combat diver, and that means a lot to me. So, combat divers stick together. But that has nothing to do with cybersecurity. So we won't even talk about being a combat diver today. We'll talk more about home cybersecurity. So let's jump into this real quick. Cliff, how you feeling, man? I heard COVID yes, COVID no, COVID I don't know. What's going on here?
It's probably more of a COVID I don't know at this situation. So like tested positive and then tested negative, trying to see what's going on here.
So what test was was it the same test? Just real quick, so I think this is interesting, and I know we talk about COVID a lot on this show because it is a security thing as well. It's not just it is a national epidemic or global epidemic. So I think it's interesting to talk about this just for a second.
Yeah. So originally I took the rapid test because I needed to get the quickest results that I could, and it showed positive. And then a couple days later, actually just a day ago, I took the PCR test, which is supposed to be more accurate. That's what we're using pretty much for international travel and all that kind of stuff. So took that one, and that one said negative. So I'm hoping it means just negative.
Right. So you really don't know what you have.
Correct.
I gotta love it. All right, Jake, what are you drinking this morning?
Man, I almost said something smart about being down in Key West, but I'm just going to leave it right there, and we're just going to move on to what we're drinking. Yeah. So what am I drinking? I'm drinking, the typical Waterloo strawberry again. I'm staying strong with that with a keto diet, and then like a chai tea, almond milk, cream thing.
You talk about me, and you give me a hard time pinkies up, and you're drinking a chai tea with almond milk. Are you kidding me?
Hey, it's vanilla flavored, but it only has 4 grams of carbs. You know what? I want to look like Cliff again.
Don't we all?
So look, I'm having great results with keto right now. Lost about almost 20 pounds. However, I might fall over of a massive heart attack from the eggs and bacon and sausage and red meat and everything else I'm eating. But I'm not starving. I'm losing weight like crazy.
That's kind of why I stopped doing it. Is I felt like I was going to have a heart attack any day now.
And you feel good?
Yeah, no issues.
When I did it, I had super energy. I was full. I wasn't craving food all the time. I just had chest pain. So,
my blood pressure's dropping. I don't know. Things are good. So, awesome. I mean, if I do fall dead of a heart attack, that's probably why, or, just my life's catching up with me. But yeah, anyways, enough about me. Cliff, what are you drinking?
I've kind of just been switching to coffee for my Keurig. If I make a pot of coffee, I'll drink the whole thing. So the Keurig is helping me maintain 1 cup in the morning.
Yeah. Are you a big coffee drinker?
I do enjoy coffee a lot. I'm not a super big into what type of coffee it is. I just like light roast and medium roast coffee, but
gotcha.
I'll pretty much drink anything.
Do you look for the little hinted flavors like Will does?
Yeah. No, I just go for the non-bold tasting coffee.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just a normal dude. You're just a normal guy.
Just a normal guy, man.
All right, now let's switch to a non-normal guy. Will, what are you drinking? You got your straw to tell us all?
Should I talk about my almond milk vanilla chai tea? Oh wait, that was you. No, I'm drinking my light roast Flying Elk from Black Rifle Coffee Company. It's their subscription that I get every month. It's super good. It's probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite. My new one. It's, like I said, it's a light roast, hints of caramel and vanilla and all that good stuff. Not over roasty or anything like that. And I'm also drinking a San Pellegrino dark Morello cherry and pomegranate flavored mineral water. So I got
Cute.
a little pinkies up for you, Jake.
Very cute, Will. Very, very
Yeah.
cute. I like it. Yeah, Will, you got a lot of hate in your heart today, man. I don't know if that's because you're watching like the crap going on right now in the news, or
I don't watch the news at all.
or if you just
Nope. I was
Well,
just
cool.
born this way.
Gotcha.
Embrace the hate. Good. You don't get that. That's a Star Wars reference.
No, but I did see that the chick from Mandalorian got fired for stating some like historical facts.
Yeah.
Again, man, I'm gonna like throw us off the subject all day. So you guys, your job is like to bring me back in. So let's jump into the main topic here.
Right.
Home technical security. Again, we've been doing this one-on-one series for everyone. We started off with physical security. We pretty much wrapped that up last week, and so this week and for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking and discussing technical security and focusing on home networks and social media. Again, we'll already introduce Cliff. Thank God we have him, because both Will and I know very little about this. And so it'll kind of just us sitting back, maybe laughing at each other.
Yeah.
And we got Cliff here to kind of set us straight on, what we're going to talk about. So this week, we're really talking about basically the internet coming into the house, and then what you do from that port inside your house, the router, and to your computer. And so with that, Cliff, can you explain to everyone, and again, we don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence. I just figure if I didn't know this, hopefully someone else didn't know. So what does a router do?
So you have your modem and your router, right? So your modem is what comes in from, let's say, that coax cable that creates an internet connection in general. And then you have your router, which usually changes it to like a Wi-Fi connection or makes multiple connections so you can plug into it and things like that. So usually what we're dealing with is the router, and that's what spins up that wireless internet connection for your household or your restaurant or wherever you are out in public.
Cool.
You haven't lost me yet. Okay, I think I'm good. So how do you set up your router? How do you configure it for like home security? I know I did it a year ago, but Ray sent me a little step-by-step sheet, and I forgot everything that I did. So
yeah, and it's usually the first thing that I'll do is when I get a new router. Every router is different, right? It's the same thing as a computer. They all have different little settings and options. Like same thing going from like a Mac to a Windows machine, right? They're different. So I go in there and I'll check every single setting and see what they even have to offer on this router, right? So now it's kind of getting tougher because companies like AT&T and all these other people are setting up your routers for you, and they don't give you as much access to that router to change settings. So I go in there, I explore a lot. I kind of see what type of encryption is being used. So we're talking about WEP, WPA, WPA2, and now the new WPA3. Pretty much, old to new. The harder ones it's getting harder to crack for the newer ones, right? So you want to use the newest encryption and the new security standard, right? And then it's just talking about, go ahead.
Cliff, just kind of stop you there. So the WPAs, the WPEs, and the different numbers, are those just different security settings that your router comes with? And that I guess you want to update your router to make sure that is it WPA3 now? Is that what you're saying?
So I'm not sure if WPA3 is being used right now, just because not all, let's say like devices can utilize WPA3.
Gotcha.
We'll say in the near future, you're going to want to be on WPA3.
Okay.
But that also brings up a good point. So if your router has the newest and greatest, you should use it. So right now we'd want all routers to be using WPA2 at least, right? If you have an old router in your house, though, you might not even be able to use WPA2, and you might be on WPA, the first one. So, and that's not something that you can necessarily update. That's a lot of hardware based stuff too. So got to have something newish.
Gotcha. So and this is great we're talking about this, because Will and I were talking about yesterday. I'm like, all right, WP, WPA, what are we talking about? YMCA, all this other stuff. So the WPAs, and those are really just an acronym for router security hardware that's comes with your router.
Correct. It's the encryption standard that's used with it.
Beautiful. Check. I'm hearing
it clicked.
I'm tracking. Cool. Cool. This is probably gonna be super painful for Cliff. He's gonna be like,
he's gonna be like, "Are you
these
kidding
guys, these guys." So, but I figure, hey, if
So
Will
what's
and I are both this way,
WPS
there
then?
might be others.
Oh, that's a good question. We'll just brought up what WPS is. So WPS is an old way to connect devices to your router, which I highly recommend not using. So to give an example what it is, there's usually like a little button on your router that says WPS connect. And you can say, like, go to your computer and say, connect to my Wi-Fi, press WPS button at the same time to connect to it without putting a password in. And it'll let you connect without putting a password in. But what that means is it uses a PIN or some other type of authentication that isn't changed, and it's easier to get into from an adversary standpoint. So like, if it has a PIN of a 4-digit PIN or a 6-digit PIN, it never changes. So once that's cracked, you can always utilize it to get into that network. So I usually try to disable WPS if I can and never use it.
So even though, like, if you were going to do it yourself, you'd have to push the button on the router and on your device. You'd still be able to break into it without hitting that button.
Correct. So it's pretty much, if you have the PIN to the WPS, it's easier to get into. And there's ways to get around not having to press the button and things like that.
So it's kind of like garage door openers. There's a handful of settings on your garage door opener. If you have enough time and you want to go around opening up other people's garage door openers, you can kind of change it as, I guess, the way, or my way off, Cliff.
Well, it's all related. So you're talking about garage door openers, which have unique frequencies that push out the frequency to open up to that garage and things like that. It's similar.
I'm saying, if like a hacker, if you're using the WPS system, the old antiquated system, it's very easy to enter into your network.
If someone knows what they're doing and without that much work, it will be fairly easy for someone.
Okay.
Cool.
It's
so what if
you're a
a
lot easier than most people think?
Yeah, for maybe the younger generation. Me and Jake are a little closer to the hill than some of you,
Yeah, well, I'm seeing that gray right there.
It's actually white, but that's all right. So if you actually knew what you're doing as far as the router and the WPA 1, 2, 3, all that stuff, how could you kind of take the next step to securing your router?
Yeah, so it starts off, what you would think it might be is a strong and complex passwords. That's going to be the biggest thing for you. When I say that, that's going to be for your Wi-Fi router and your Wi-Fi password. So when you have your router device, the physical device, there is a password to get onto that device. Same thing as like a computer. You have to log in your computer before you can do anything. And one thing that people don't realize is that these default passwords on these routers, they're just sitting here, and like, I just happen to have one right here. It says right here, to get on, username is admin, password is password, right? And it's usually the case, admin, or admin blank. And you can Google that too to get all default passwords for routers, and it'll pop up, and they're super easy to get onto. And if you have that credential to get onto that, you control what happens with your whole internet and your Wi-Fi. So changing that password and then creating difficult passwords for your Wi-Fi in general.
So Will, or never mind. I'm not even going to go there. I was going to say, if you don't like a neighbor, now you got a way to mess with them.
Yeah. So, what's IP and MAC filtering?
Yeah. So one thing before we get into that, one thing you want to be aware of is, they make it easy these days. So like AT&T, they have an AT&T app on your phone where you can view your whole settings, right? One thing you can go on there on your computer is go look at the device list that's connected to your internet, right? See what's on there. I routinely try to check mine to make sure there's no weird devices that I didn't put on there. And what you can do is you can do IP and MAC filtering, which is essentially you can lock down your internet and only allow certain devices to connect that you allow to connect to it. So every device that connects to the internet has a MAC address. And that's kind of how it's like a social security number or a serial number to a device when it comes to internet. And you can kind of, lock it down and control what does and what can't access your internet.
So, Cliff, I know I have a different router than what my provider sent me. I have that Euro mesh system.
Okay.
And so I'm assuming you can do the same thing with any router, whether you buy it or one that's provided. Yeah, you go in and you check these security systems.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's two things you can do. So especially like Eero and a lot of those other ones that have the mesh systems, they make these really good apps that you can navigate through and control all of it, right?
Yeah.
So you want to go through that entire app, but you also want to go log on to the router itself. Sometimes it's a little bit easier, or you can get more information if you log into it through a Internet Explorer browser type thing. And sometimes that'll be labeled on the back of the router how to do that.
Yeah, I know the my service provider, I have their app, and it's kind of nice. I can limit my kids' internet use. So after like 8 o'clock, it cuts off and they can't get on the internet until the next morning and stuff like that. So that's kind of nice. One of the features. So I know I routinely check to make sure that I don't have any leeches on there on my network. So, so go ahead.
I was saying just one thing to mention that is, you're talking about leeches and stuff, is I actually have a guest Wi-Fi network that anybody that comes over to my house, I give them that information so they don't even get onto my network.
Awesome. And is that hard to do? Is it just set up a guest network within your settings?
Most new hardware and, ISP internet providers will have that access within their hardware too. So it's getting easier. If you have a good router that you bought from a third party, they usually have it as well.
Yeah, I know the Eero system. That's what I use again. And it automatically came like, did you want to set up with a guest account? So I do. So whenever anyone comes over, I always give them like you said, the guest.
Exactly.
So, man, I'm learning a lot from Cliff. There's some
and
things
make
I need
sure
to
you
work on.
use,
You see me taking notes and other things. I'm like, I'm all right.
And make sure you don't use the same password for the guests as you do for your main network.
Exactly.
Right?
Difficult, strong, complex password.
So not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Maybe try to add a few letters in there.
Gotcha. A few characters as well, I'm sure.
All right. So let's kind of talk about, I know we were talking about the devices that are on your network and stuff. Internet of Things security, that's kind of like the big thing, right? With the smart camera or the smart like doorbells and the smart devices where you, hey, so-and-so play this music, and your grocery store list is going to be on your refrigerator and all this stuff. All that's on your network. How do you kind of secure everything there?
So happy you brought that up. First thing you should do, which we're just talking about, is put that on a different network.
Oh, okay.
So if you can get another router, or maybe even use your guest network if you want to, is put all the IoT stuff on its own network, away from all the stuff that you use that's important, if you wouldn't want someone to have. So that's the first thing I would say, right? But, IoT security is difficult these days, because it's kind of like when computers first came out. Nobody was thinking about security. They were like, wow, we can do this now. Let's just do this. Let's see what happens. We connect everything together, have really good convenience with cameras and doorbells, make your life easier. But it's got very ambiguous security standards, and it's pretty much low security standards if they even have any. So that kind of makes it hard. We're talking about privacy. A lot of them don't even have passwords, kind of like what we were talking about with the routers. All the physical devices sometimes have access physically with a password, and some of them are very easy to get into.
So it sounds like everybody's in a rush to put out the next great thing. They're not really taking care of the back end and protecting us on it.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. I never even thought about that. I'll have to figure out how to set that up on my stuff. Now I only have one smart device. I don't have a smart refrigerator. I don't understand why you would do that. But
you think about it, right? Like, and I tell this with clients, and again, we have technical guys like Cliff on the team when we're talking on this technical side here. But your thermostat is controlled. The new thermostats, for the most part, are controlled through the internet. You can have your whole alarm system, like your whole house. You can basically control while you're gone through the internet. So think about the security of that, and do you really want that on the open network?
Exactly.
All right. So we've kind of talked about how to secure the internet coming in and the Wi-Fi invisible stuff. So how do you secure your computer now? Let's move on to computer settings. How do you take care of the actual what you're connecting to that network?
Well, I think you forgot a certain thing though before, like that, like multi-factor authentication, right? That's I know we preach that all the time, either two-factor or whatever it is. So Cliff, can you explain like the importance of multi-factor authentication, what it is, and why people should have it on, in my opinion, every single smart device they have and every account that they have?
Yeah, so I use multi-factor authentication in everything that I can, essentially. And I use it in ways that are harder for other people to obtain. So like I use applications rather than like a text message service, right? When it comes to security, it's harder to compromise an application than it is like someone's phone number, something like that. So yeah, so essentially multi-factor authentication is requiring two different methods of authentication to access one thing. So you're separating uh, entities for authentication. So, if someone grabs one of your passwords, they also have to be able to get a hold of a device or whatever you're using for that multi-factor authentication, just making it a lot harder. And, that goes into biometrics, applications, phone calls, text messaging, all that kind of stuff for the multi-factor authentication. Yeah. So it's a standard these days to be using at least two methods of multi-factor authentication.
So I know a lot of apps and stuff they'll like my phone will ask me if my facial recognition stuff, if I can use that for the multi-factor. Is that more secure than getting something through the app, or as secure, or how's that?
So yeah, usually biometrics, so we're talking about fingerprints, facial scan, voice recognition, anything like that is going to be more secure, and mainly because it's not using a password. And like passwords and hashes that go with the password are usually what's compromised first when it comes to those type of things. So they're they're harder to compromise.
Gotcha. Okay.
I know for my wife, she hates it. Well, every time she wants to log in the bank account, I'm like, hey, use the app. B, you're going to have to do, multi-factor authentication. Why? I'm like, because security. Yeah. I want someone wiping out the bank account, and everything else. And so I think I think the younger generation probably gets it right and understands security. Kind of like we understand physical security, because that was it still is a thing. But I think for the older generation, it's that comfort. It's like, oh, it's another thing. I just want to get there faster and sooner. Like, take that 30 seconds. It doesn't even take that long.
That's going to go into the whole convenience versus security argument right there. So, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to computers now that we've got everything taken care of in the invisible air. How do you make sure your computers and stuff are secure?
So I usually use Windows machines. It's a predominant machine in the world right now. Obviously, you have Mac as well, right? But I think Microsoft's done a really good job with having their built-in security features. So we're talking about their, Microsoft Defender. It comes with an antivirus. If you have their cloud services, it comes with ransomware protection. It has Windows Hello, which is talking about those biometric facial recognition. It has built-in firewall, built-in exploit protection, all that kind of stuff. So that's the baseline. It's just whatever your computer has built in, go ahead and use all of that, right? And then if you need to, you can add on to that. So we're talking about, like a malware protection, malware bytes, or an antivirus, Avast or McAfee, one of those things, right? Got to have something on your machine to protect you for that. That's the biggest thing.
Okay. And
so you're saying,
go ahead.
At least with the Microsoft systems, they're built in, and anything out, whether it is a Microsoft system or a Mac system, whatever you're using, you should always have kind of like a third party antivirus, malware detection.
I wouldn't say third party, because Microsoft's is built in is really good.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, if it doesn't have like if you're using a older Windows operating system, you might need to get something third party, but I use Microsoft's and I'm pretty happy with it.
And that goes to how important it is to keep everything up to date, right?
Correct.
Because that's essentially what you're doing. Your update is patching any holes or vulnerabilities that they've found in the network, or
exactly
protection.
So a hacker's biggest goal is to find a vulnerability that is not patched. And that's why we get those updates randomly. And then what is it, like every Tuesday, one Tuesday a month, right? Is you want to get that exploit and hack those machines and compromise those machines before it's patched. So that's why it's important to do security updates and firmware updates for your machines.
I think, talking of that, and why this is important, just looking at like cybersecurity facts, there's a hacker attack every 39 seconds right now. 43% of those attacks are going to small businesses. And what's going to blow a lot of people's mind, possibly, it doesn't surprise me that much, but since COVID-19 began, the FBI has reported a 300% increase in cyber crimes. Yep. So, cybercrime is huge right now. Everyone working from home, everyone's on their devices now. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
So I know I use a VPN and it has like one of those features where it blocks malicious websites and stuff like that. Is that kind of a good idea to use? So.
Yeah. So I try to use a VPN whenever I can. I think everyone should use a VPN. It's more important when you're not on a network that you know is safe. But you also have those extra features that you're talking about that VPNs are throwing in now is ad blocking, bad websites, things like that, just bad areas that you shouldn't be browsing in and just keeping people safe in general. If I'm out in any kind of public Wi-Fi on my phone or my computer, I'm using a VPN.
So my device has
who don't know what a VPN is. Let's talk that real quick.
Yeah. So it's a virtual private network. All that means is let's say you're in Starbucks and you're connecting to Starbucks Wi-Fi to get to your Wells Fargo bank account. So that means Starbucks Wi-Fi can see it first, and then the stream to go to Wells Fargo bank account can be seen, right? So what you're doing with a VPN is you're going to be doing that, but you're in a tunnel that's encrypted. So you're going, all they would see, like, let's say if I was a bad person trying to look at your stuff, all I'm seeing is a whole bunch of encrypted information going through, and I know that they're using some kind of encryption standard, and I can't view what that is.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it's kind of like putting a protective layer over your stream, I guess you could say, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So like I know my service provider has a VPN service that they provide for me. One thing I don't like about it is you have to allow them access to it. So I don't, yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's tough. So what I like to do is I like to look at different VPN services, and I essentially see who owns the company and where those servers are located. Right. I'll be honest right now, there's a lot of companies out there from China that own a lot of VPN services. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, I'm not going to take any VPN that's owned by China. Right. So, I recommend going to some of those companies that have VPN servers and locations in a lot of the countries that have privacy laws that are made better for the user and not the owners in the countries.
Yep. Now paid versus free, do you have to pay, or are there any like options for free for people who don't want to pay for the service or can't afford that?
I'm not going to say there's not good free options, but in most cases, I would say you probably get what you pay for in these kind of things. I would say if you use a free one, there could be some good ones, but you usually just can't use that much data going back and forth. So maybe you're limited to like a couple gigabytes or something of that sort. Okay. So usually the better ones are the paid ones.
I know that I pay, for a service, and daily there's an update. And I like that. To me, it's like, okay, hey, I need to update this because they've obviously found, a weakness in the armor somewhere to update. So, and again, I know Cliff and I talked, and we had him on the show months ago, and this was something he did talk about was VPNs, the ones that are over in China and other places. Do your research, find out where they are, who owns them. So I definitely did that with this VPN service. So thanks for that little tidbit of information.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. So I know you talked about passwords a little bit. How do you keep track of all your passwords? Because like my memory is horrible, and I know you're not supposed to use the same one over and over again. So you got any tips for me?
So it's kind of, I would say sometimes has mixed reviews about using password managers. I personally use one. My password manager will create complex and difficult passwords for any website that I go to, and it will change my old passwords for me and suggest new ones. So it does password checks for you. It says, hey, we ran this password against database breach, and it says this email and password was already breached. You need to change this one. So they do have a lot of benefits. Obviously, there are some cons. If your one password manager application gets compromised, potentially all of your passwords are compromised, right? But that kind of goes to the same thing as we're talking about with like cloud services, right? It's like, do you want to give, all the security in the hands of Microsoft and Amazon and Google, right? So they're going to have a lot more money and time and resources to put into security to protect your information, as opposed to a lot of small businesses that are getting attacked a lot more often because they're low-hanging fruit. It kind of goes into that sense. It's, these password managers are going to have usually heightened security and harder to get into. Once again, you have to do your research and see how everything's going with that. But it's kind of a little mixture of convenience and more secure, actually, in this situation.
So if you don't mind, who is that password company that you use?
I use LastPass.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I haven't seen much of them in the news recently. Doesn't mean that they haven't been compromised. I've used them for a while now.
Yeah. I mean, I use
You do
Password
research
One.
first.
Another good one, in my opinion. I haven't seen anything bad on them. And they do the similar thing that yours does. So it's just for our listeners out there. Hey, if you don't, there's two: LastPass and Password One. But again, don't say, "Hey, the Coffee Squad said I need to use it, so I have to use it."
Yeah, we're not endorsing anybody.
So do your research. Make sure that it fits you and has the security parameters that you're comfortable with.
So what about like your web browsers on your computers and stuff? Like, a lot of them give the option to save your password and username and all that stuff. Is that safe, or should you? Yeah.
So let's talk about web browsers first, right? So I like to use Firefox because it's an open source web browser. And essentially, people that don't know what open source is, that means everything that's coded for that web browser is public. So yeah, people think that might be bad sometimes because people can put stuff in it, but there's so many eyes on that browser and that coding that many people can verify that nothing fishy is happening. They're not having any privacy issues where they're sending your data away, things like that, right? So that's the good thing about open source. And usually in the IT community, open source is favorable, and it's people like that kind of stuff, right? So I do use some add-ons or extensions for like my LastPass on Firefox. But I also use a ton of other add-ons and extensions in Firefox to help with privacy and good, I guess, browsing of the internet and keeping me safe and my machine safe too.
So when you're talking about add-ons and extension, what is that?
So an add-on or extension, it's same thing as like when you open up Google Chrome and you have the Google search bar at the top instead of going to google.com. All that is an extension. It's just connecting your browser to something on the internet already or to an application.
What is I know we haven't talked about email yet. So is there anything for email services, I guess?
An add-on or extension?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are. I don't really use any extensions for email. I just use kind of like common sense and secure thinking and logic when using email. And that's kind of the best thing you can do.
I know we've talked about that a lot. Jake does the hover method. So in more ways than one.
Yes, but I do more of I don't click links. I rarely ever, like, even if I know it, like, we've talked about this, over the last few weeks, like, hey, don't send me anything in a link if you can avoid it. Now, if you want to send me a website, that's fine. I can look at that website. I'll hover over it. Okay. And then I can type it into, the Google search bar when I open that up, or Safari, or whatever web browser I'm using. But definitely my rule of thumb is don't click a link, even if you know who it's coming from.
Don't do links. Any kind of phone numbers, any information on the email should be made available publicly on their websites that you can access.
Yeah, and that's one thing I know. Every once in a while, like LinkedIn, I got a phishing from a LinkedIn not too long ago, and it got me. I woke up, I was up at 3:00 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I was just got something from LinkedIn, and I thought it was LinkedIn. I clicked it. Luckily, my VPN blocker worked, and it blocked it. I was like, "Whoo, good!" But
there you go.
It gets close. That some of them get tricky.
So with that brought up, yeah, there are ad blockers and add-ons and extensions that help with that kind of stuff. There's also, so for instance, like Outlook.com uses an automatic link checker and emails that are sent to you. So if you run Outlook.com and you copy and pasted a link, it's going to take you to an Outlook link where it checks that link first before it actually accesses that website. And that's a really big thing in enterprise security as well for email.
So what is Bloody Vikings? You got that on here in my show notes. I'll let you explain that, because Jake and I were trying to figure out what it was, and I was like,
I thought it was just like the Viking show. I'm like, yeah, man, we're gonna talk about Bloody Vikings. I love it.
Have you ever heard of like 10-minute mail or anything like that, where you can access a temporary email address? So
I have not, no.
It's made for like, it's like, hey, I go log in at Starbucks Wi-Fi, and it says you have to give an email address to be able to log onto this Wi-Fi. Bam, go to Bloody Vikings. Even if it's on your phone, if you don't have internet, just bring it up and like, hey, give me a quick 10-minute email address or whatever that is. And you can access that. And then you can even acknowledge those emails within these systems if you have to confirm something. So it's a multiple list of different temporary email systems and applications and websites that you can access to have temporary email access.
So don't do what I do is like I give them just my family members like email addresses and Will's email address. Like here you go, and they can get all the spam mail that they want.
That's a method too. That's a method.
Gotcha. I'm totally kidding about that, by the way.
How important are the tracking blockers and ad blockers, stuff like that?
Well, I mean, how important is your privacy to you? I don't know. It's a personal question. So, I've done a couple of studies, going to generic websites, commonly used websites, and I'm talking hundreds of trackers being labeled to these websites. And I don't have a setup right now to show you guys. Maybe we can do it in the future, but you can go on to these applications and websites that'll show you all the trackers that are looking at these websites, and where all these trackers come from just from accessing a website without even clicking anything. We're talking about websites and people that are just gathering information, right? So, the big ones, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all that kind of stuff, that kind of have their hands in all these websites. And it kind of, if you think about it, it's how come you can say, oh, that new car looks really cool. And then, you have new car advertisements on every single website you go to, kind of that kind of thing. So I personally use a whole bunch of, not a whole bunch, I use, I think 2 or 3 different ad blocker, privacy blockers, and tracking blockers on my websites or my Firefox browser to make sure that I'm doing the minimal for tracking on me.
Now, are those add-ons or extensions you're using, or is it a service you're paying for?
It's a free add-on and extension. And once again, it's that open source stuff. Is people are seeing that people are grabbing their information and tracking them. So people are creating open source applications to help minimize that, and that everyone can see. So it's usually safe.
Awesome. So let's kind of wrap this up. As we talked about the router, we've talked about the Internet of Things, we've talked email and passwords. We've mentioned Wi-Fi a little bit. So can you tell everyone like the advantages of Wi-Fi, disadvantages of Wi-Fi, and then let's talk about like, are there ways to hide your Wi-Fi network, your home network, or if you have a small business, your business network as well?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you can hide your Wi-Fi broadcasting signal. So let's say I had, Will's Wi-Fi, right? Someone could still access Will's Wi-Fi if they had the password, but it just wouldn't be available as a viewable network. That's just what we call hiding your SSID. And I'll be honest though, as someone that has some experience with wireless and wireless hacking, if I ever see a hidden network, I'm probably going to go after that one first and see what that is. So it's,
why is that?
They're hiding something.
Yeah,
and I kind of want to know what they're hiding. It's kind of a reason to be doing it, and I want to know why.
A lot of the stuff I've been reading now is saying, they say don't really hide your networks because
hide in plain sight.
Yeah, hide in plain sight.
Yeah.
Okay, and then network names, right? Like I see a lot of just in my neighborhood, you can see all your neighbors' names, right? You see first name, last name. What do you recommend for like if you're able to, when you name your network name, any tips on there?
I would say, once again, kind of hide in plain sight. If you notice everyone has AT&T and it's like an AT&T 3401 or whatever, I would just kind of stick with that. Don't make anything too loud of a name, and to cause extra eyes come into it.
So I shouldn't be changing my network name to stay off, get away from me, leave me alone, stuff like that.
I would not recommend doing that.
I'd probably limit like also your personal identifiable stuff too, first name,
Exactly.
last name, that kind of stuff. Okay. Awesome. That's good to know, because I was like, okay, if I want to hide my network, should I? And I'm glad we had this conversation because I was expecting to hear like, oh yeah, definitely hide your network, and so that's definitely what I'm not going to be doing now.
Ideally, if you could have a network with no Wi-Fi, just everything's plugged in through an Ethernet cable, that's probably going to be the more safe route. But, once again, we're talking about convenience and security. People don't want to do that.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate you joining us this week, Cliff. Where we are going to have Cliff back next week to talk a little more in depth about some other cybersecurity type stuff. what is it? PAI and PII, all that stuff. Well, I don't know what that is. I'll have to explain it to me next week.
Publicly
But,
available information.
Yeah, there you go. So, Jake's an intel guy, so he knows a little bit more about it than I do. But make sure you guys follow us at coffeesquadpodcast.com. Go to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe. Leave us comments. Let us know what you think. Appreciate everything you're doing for us, Cliff. And Jake.
Yeah, Cliff, thank you for everything. And I know we talked about a lot this week, and Cliff's worked on a little web series for us as well that people can follow along with. And I know for me, it's hard just to listen to and like understand it all. So the web series will be posted up in a few weeks. And we'll talk more with Cliff next week. So thank you.
And that'll be at fc-llc.org. So just keep an eye out for that. And we'll put the links and stuff in our show comments once it's up. Cliff, appreciate everything. We'll see you next week, brother.
Sounds good.
Thanks, bud.